reactions were actually really good. I must admit that I expected that people will hate me and hate the film because it is talking about one of the biggest taboos in Israel. So I was quite afraid before I released the film. And the reaction, I was quite surprised to understand, to realize that the people are much open-minded to hear and see and to talk about these delicate issues around 1948. And of course, you know, not everybody is going to the festivals and to the cinemas to watch those kind of films. And there is a large part in Israel that is not willing to see those kind of content. But people reacted. I think it was a pain also in Israel. I'll answer another question, how Palestinian audiences that saw the film reacted. And for them, it was big pain to see it, but it gave them a little bit of hope, because for almost 80 years, Israel never talked about 1948 and never was willing to admit Israel's part in what happened and what happened to those lands and to the refugees and to the people that lived here. And I think that there is a new generation in Israel that is not afraid to talk about it and not afraid to say, we made a big mistake and we are sorry. And I understood that you screened the film about Tantura, and there was another film, yes, documentary about Deir Yassin, and a new book that released last year about what happened in the villages in 1948. So I can feel that there is a new generation in Israel that talks about this delicate issue and is less afraid than the older generation. And I definitely felt it in the audience. I think that people understand that you cannot hide and you cannot run, and this issue will continue chasing us if we'll not look in the mirror and say, that's what happened, and we are willing to talk about it.
Michal, a question for you. Now, the film talks about, you know, a land with people, without people, for people without land. It also talks about a variety of other things. Are you there simply presenting what the typical narrative within Israel has been, or you don't necessarily agree with that yourself?
Oh, no,
okay.
Definitely no. That's the reason that I made the film to begin with, because we all grew up on the Zionist myth that it was a desert here and there was swamps and nothing and disease, and then the Zionist pioneers came to the country and made the desert bloom. And they built new settlements and created the state of Israel. That's what I learned in school. And that all the songs that we grew up on talks about this narrative. And I was so angry to grow up and through my great-grandfather's diaries to find out that we had a completely different history. And, you know, it's happened less than 70 years ago. And I think I have a right to know the history of my country. And I was so angry that somebody thought that it will be okay to hide the painful history from us, from the younger generation. And I'm not willing to cooperate with this. I have 2 children, and they're definitely going to see the film and to learn about what really happened here.
Yeah. The reason I brought the question is because some people, they're asking and saying they're really offended to hear that, and they seem like they might have been under the impression that the film was saying that, but it's good that you clarified that. Can you just briefly mention some of those things, like the examples I gave that are in the film, that the film is really intended to debunk in terms of some of these myths?
I hope that I understood the question, but originally I had a plan to do the film, like to tell one big myth, and then to tell the reality, and to go to a big myth and reality, and just to compare. It didn't happen because I had a problem with the archival research, and I think that the story right now is much more interesting. But they the myth. I don't know where to start. It's there. They told us that all the Arab countries attacked Israel, and then the Palestinians just fled away. They were afraid, and they fled away, and there was no destroying villages and no expelling people. So that's another myth, and that's another lie. And until today, when the film about Deir Yassin launched, and the film about Tantura, people are still saying that never happened.
So, like, another example is the word transfer. So maybe you could talk a little bit about what the transfer. The word transfer sounds quite ambiguous here.
Yeah, in Israel also, but that's funny, because when I screened the film in several places in Israel, people told me, but back then to transfer population was quite normal. So this was a very common reaction that I received. But no, it wasn't quite normal. And I always saying, even if there was a war and people had to leave or expelled from their homes, so the biggest difference is that the Palestinians didn't get their home backs or any compensation. And you cannot find any other example in history that refugees, after more than 70 years, didn't get any acknowledgement or compensation or their homes back. And so this is the biggest difference. And this is why transfer is not a common thing that people used to do back then. And for me, it was very extreme to find out that my great-grandfather planned and established the transfer committee and tried to evacuate the Palestinian population from the land of Israel, from Palestine.
So do you think your great-grandfather had some remorse at the end about what he did? And what did he try to do to, or was he ousted when that happened?
I think that 1 year after, in 1949, he realized that Israel cannot just forget about the Palestinian refugees and think that if he'll not do nothing about it, it will disappear. I think he was among the first people who understood that it's not going to disappear, and it's going to be one of the biggest problems for us in Israel. And he understood that we did a mistake, and we need to bring back some of the Palestinians and to take care of the others, to resettle in a new country with all the compensation and everything, and to deal with the refugee problem with money, with return, with everything. But just we cannot leave almost million refugees around the borders of the country, the new borders of the country, and just to think that it will disappear someday. And he was totally right. And I wish that somebody could listen to him back then.
Krista, what do you have?
There's a lot. I'm just going through lots of questions. I guess one question that came up that's really significant is, you know, I guess it's clear that Palestinians were expelled, and actually half of the population in the area that Israel first took over and established a state in, those people were expelled before the state was even declared. And of course, Plan Dilat is part of that, or however you say that, Plan D. I just wondered why you chose not to mention that. Is it because it wasn't in the diaries, or, you know, you fill in a lot of historical information to fill in the gaps, so to speak, or to give context to your to the words in the diary. And I just wondered why, and some of our viewers are wondering why you chose not to name it for what it was.
Yeah,
which was
sure. I have a perfect
an actual
answer
deliberate
for it.
plan.
Actually, I during my research, there was one historian in Israel that told me you have to check Plan D. You have to put it in the film. Your great grandfather was part of it. And I don't have nothing to lose anymore. So I went to the archive, and I sat and read the whole Plan D and everything regards Plan D. My great grandfather wasn't related at all to the plan, and I checked it a million times. And if he were related to the plan, it was probably in the film. But since it was a military plan, and Joseph Weits wasn't related to the military, like he did. He didn't take part in the in the destroying of the villages. He was maybe part of the plan that thought about it, but he wasn't part of the army, wasn't part of the military. And Plan D was a plan of the Haganah, which was the organization just before the army in Israel was established. So he wasn't related to this. And I checked it 1,000 times, and that's the reason it's not in the film. Just like plenty of other things that happened are not in the film, I choose to go with Joseph Weits' narrative and with Joseph Weits' diaries. and Plan D wasn't part of the diaries and wasn't part of his activity.
Michal, I have a kind of very small question is, when Israel and the military decided to destroy the villages, why did they leave half of them standing? You know, I would have figured they were going to just erase them completely, but they most of these villages exist now. Like half the houses are there, the walls, you could see almost the whole village in some areas. In fact, you know, Lifta is still standing, you know, all the houses, but they're like empty. Is this something, was that something intended, or was just sloppy work that they did?
I don't have an answer for you because I checked it and I couldn't find an answer for it in the documents. I tend to think that it was a sloppy job. I think that, you know, what is sloppy? I think that they didn't have enough people and enough money and enough equipment to complete the job. And in some of the places, Jewish people settled instead of the Palestinians, especially in the big cities, of course. And I asked myself this question a million times because I wandered around the country and saw, as you're saying, complete houses and everything, and that I don't have answer for this. And during my research, I couldn't find an answer. So I guess they didn't have people, money, and equipment to do it.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe time.
They left all the evidence in place.
Yeah, that's really weird because, you know what, they had 70 years to clear the evidence. That's really $1 million question because
well, in a
they
way,
can do it today.
Yeah, in a way, we're glad they didn't, because now we have these places that we can refer to, we can see, and we can show the people in the world, this is what happened and this is what's done. And it's I was just curious to understand why.
What's also significant about the village sites that remain, whether they're houses on those village sites or not, is that the majority of the village sites remain what I will call vacant. Some of them are used for grazing lands. I would say a minority of them have actually been built over, tend to be more in the coastal central part of the country where the Jewish population is concentrated. But for a great number of villages remain, and it allows that question or to debunk the myth that there's nowhere for those Palestinians to return to. So I think it is important to acknowledge that there's space for people to come back to their homes, whether their house is still standing or not. And of course, in cities and towns, it's a completely different story, as you know, some of the people in the film mentioned, or the historical footage, that houses were simply given to new immigrants coming from Europe or elsewhere. So yeah, whether the house is there or not, you know, doesn't erase the question of whether people should have the right to return, and that question should never leave the table of any future negotiation or settlement. I wonder, you know, you grew up with the myth of the land without a people for a people without a land, and obviously you address that in your film, and you happen to have a family member who was very instrumental in the planting of forests and the hiding of villages, and also advocating for the expelling Palestinians. Not everyone has that deeply personal story, but certainly you speak to how most Jews or Israelis were raised or have been raised under that myth, and how your film hopes to undo that and challenge people to see more of the truth that your film uncovers. I just wonder if you could talk personally about that experience of having to delve into your personal history, and how successful you feel you are in challenging other Jews and Israelis and those who have embraced a partial narrative of the truth, how successful have you been given the world we live in now, the Israeli government, where things are headed? I know you spoke very positively of some of the people who have seen your film, but if you think beyond that, if we look at the real world and the real context we're living in the last couple of years, where the direction is going in Israeli politics, are we really closer to embracing that truth and opening that black box?
To tell you the truth, I have tears in my eyes for the past 3 months because Israel is going to a very bad place. And if I'm allowed to be cynical, I don't know if it's totally to be cynical. I don't wish to anyone to have the right to return to Israel right now, because it's going to be pretty hell over here. When Netanyahu's government is going to turn this place to extremely right-wing dictatorship, and we are totally heading towards this. So I'm thinking, if I want to live in this place with my family, and I'm protesting every day in the street just to try to avoid this crazy government. And this government is not going to keep the rights for gays or Black people or women and the Arabs here. So the minority, if you are a minority in Israel, so you are in a bad situation right now. So right now, where I'm sitting, it's very difficult for me to think about some kind of a solution, because again, we are heading towards a very bad place, and it's going to be a very bad for the Arab population here. 1 month ago, the illegal settlements did a pogrom in Hawara village and tried to burn the village with people inside. So I think we are about to enter to hell here. And I'm not exaggerating, because people extremely right-wing and that support the illegal settlements are holding this ship that is sailing, I don't know where. So right now, it's very difficult for me to see a solution. And the left wing in Israel, it's a minority. And so I think that soon that we will not be able to screen films like that in Israel. And I'm very afraid. So I don't have a good answer for it, except that I don't know what it's going to happen, and I'm quite afraid.
No, Michal, what the Palestinians are saying is now the Israelis are getting a very diluted taste of what the Palestinians have been dealing with for the last 50 years in the occupied territories. And now they're all of a sudden
or since
up in arms.
48.
So any comments on that?
In other words, were things so much rosier a couple of years ago for Israelis? You know, what was there nothing to demonstrate about I'm just saying, was there nothing to demonstrate about 2 years ago? Why now, when it's only this extreme, when Jewish Israelis feel personally threatened from a judiciary standpoint? Where, what about
well,
2 years ago,
well,
5
it's
years
not
ago, 10 years
only,
ago?
demonstrating right now. You know, there are people
Sure.
that demonstrating like me since I remember myself. But right now, the government is trying to do judicial
Judicial.
judicial
Judicial.
overrule, and to cancel the Supreme Court and just to put the judges that they want to put in the Supreme Court that are extremely right wing. So right now, this is the most terrible time to be an Israeli, I think. And
You know what they really want to do is they want to take the manual that they use in the occupied territories and apply it to the rest of the country, right? That's what it sounds like.
So I'm saying that if there were, 30% of the Israeli population that supported the Palestinian rights and were against the occupation, maybe 40%. So now we don't have, we are so weak right now, but we are fighting, and we are doing our best.
So, Michal, somebody in the audience asked the question is, what made you kind of develop this feeling and attitude that the other Israelis haven't really come to see yet? What was special about you? What circumstances led you to question the myths that you grew up on, while others are not doing that?
Well, I think I grew up like this it's what kind of education you get from your parents. And I grew up in a very left-wing surrounding, and I grew up in Jerusalem. It was pretty difficult. And when you live in Jerusalem, you feel all the political tension all the time, and you have to ask questions, and you have to be aware. And to tell you the truth, I think that I'm not doing enough, and I wish I had more time to do more. And yeah, I think just the environment that I grew up in, and I lost the word in English, but I was politically aware during my 20s and 30s, and that led me to not afraid to deal with this subject, and to go deeper and deeper in the research and convince whoever to watch the film and to talk about it.
Another question, Michal, from one of the audience saying, now there are mention in the film of why the Palestinians were terrified and left, and there was a line also, all you had to do is drop a couple of mortar shells over their heads and then they're all gone. And somebody's asking, why wasn't there mention of like the Tantura and Deir Yassin, or as a driving force behind terrifying the population?
Well, again, I stick to the diaries, and Joseph Weits was he wasn't in Tantura and in the scene to write about it, and he didn't mention specific what happened in those villages, and if he did, if he was mentioned it, so it was for sure in the film, but he sat in the office in Jerusalem or Tel Aviv and was one of the heads that thought about and planned everything, but he didn't mention specific villages except from one villages or two that he visited after demolition. So it just wasn't written in the diaries, and my screenplay is the diaries.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah, probably our viewers are missing maybe clarification in the film that the narrative will be exclusively from the diaries, because you do include a lot of historical footage, even Zionist propaganda, you know, making the desert bloom and all that with film footage. And so I think that's why people are looking for, well, what about this and what about that? So that may just be, you know, a recommendation to make that
I think
clearer.
it was very clear in the film that the Joseph Weits is speaking from the diary, and it's his voice, or my voice. So there are no other people talking in the film from the archives, or it's the voices are very clear, and it was very important for me. Whatever Joseph Weits or the actor is saying is taking directly from the diaries. It was very important for me to show it.
So what's your relationship like with your family, having gone through this process of interviewing everyone? And obviously not all of them had read the diaries, and now they hear a lot more than maybe they knew before, that even contradicts, you know, some of what they were raised on, even your own personal family history of looking at is it your grandfather or great grandfather? Because I know that word got kind of went back and forth in the film, great grandfather. So you know, that raised some questions.
We had the chance to talk a lot in our family about this, and I'm very happy because until the point that the film launched, so as you saw in the film, we didn't talk about it at all. So now we are talking about this, and I heard from a lot of people that they saw together, all the family, the film, and started to talk about 1948. So it became some kind of subject that raised around the dinner table in families or in the living room, and they talked about it. So for me, that's a big step. And as for our great-grandfather, I think that he is still a family hero, but now everyone can talk about the dark side, and the Weits family can live with that also, and we need to talk about it. And I took my family members with me for Q&As after screenings, and I think it's our responsibility to talk about the dark side and not only on the bright side. And I think that we learned how to do it in the past 2 years.
Speaking of that, have you had a lot of screenings of the film in the US, particularly? I know like some of the Jewish temples and Jewish community centers may have screened the film. What has the reactions in your experience in those situations?
It was really, yeah, we screened the film in a lot of Jewish festivals in the US. And I even got prizes, and people really, there were very good reactions and very good discussions after the film. And I was quite surprised because the people in the US are familiar with the Zionist myth more than everyone. And they're the people that until today giving them their money to the Jewish National Fund. So I was quite afraid that it's going to be very dramatic to show them what really happened and who really is the Jewish National Fund. But again, I have to say that people that are going to documentary films in film festival, there are people that, to begin with, are more liberal and open-minded to talk about things, even though they're not always pleasant.
Some people
So
were
I wish
asking if
more
they
people
wanted,
will watch the
if
film.
What,
actually, some of our viewers want to know how they can show your film. Do you have a formal process that people could follow or contact you in order to set up their own viewing of the film in their congregations or organizations
Or
they're
at-
involved
Yeah,
with?
sure.
or at least is the film available publicly, like to watch on Netflix or anything like that?
No, unfortunately, no. I heard that Netflix don't take political films.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Maybe
yeah,
only
yeah.
certain kind of political films they don't take.
Yeah, they don't want to annoy the US Jews. So, so no, it is not on Netflix, and there is not a way that you can watch it in the US. But Faisal, you can give my or my producer's
Sure.
contact information, and we'll do it.
Okay. We will send an email to everybody that that attended and provide that information.
Okay.
We're having trouble with the chat isn't working. We couldn't get it to work so that we don't have the chat operating for sharing of information. We got about 15 minutes left, Krista, sorry. What else
Yeah.
do we? Oh, have you had any pushback from people? Was there any situations where people told you that this is not right, etc., or there's no such thing as Palestinians, or there's no such thing as that, or
Oh yeah. Yeah, I had a few screenings in Israel that people got really angry at me and on the film. Yeah, there were even one screening that I had to leave because people actually yelled at me, and I think they even kicked me out of the cinema. Yeah, but that's okay. That's okay because I personally made and the minute I know that I have the facts in my hand, and I showed only facts in the film, and I showed only what my great-grandfather wrote in the diary, and he was there, and he wrote everything, and you cannot argue with this. So for me, this is the truth. And if the truth is on my side, so I'm not afraid. And I think it's only natural that people, it will be difficult for them to watch. And that's okay. I can embrace it and talk with everybody. And I talk with people that are not agreeing with me. And that's what I'm doing for the past 2 years. So, and I have the power to do it in the future.
Are you inspired to work on a new film project? And if so, what ideas do you have for the future?
Yeah, the answer is yes. I for me, it's political films that deals with the occupation and what happened in the occupation and the Nakba, and the relationship between us and the Palestinians. This is the most important subject to deal with, and I think that all of the troubles that we have as a country starts with 1948, and if we don't solve those problems and let the Palestinians go to a free future, so our future will be bad. So I think this is the most important subject for me to deal with as a filmmaker. Right now, I have two very small kids, so I took a break to take care in those two babies, and I'll come back.
One of our viewers has a personal question. If you've served in the Israeli army, and if you could just comment on those who refuse to serve.
Yeah, I served in the Israeli army. I was a tour guide. Wasn't really much of a military job. And in the army, I ran into the occupation. I didn't serve in the occupied territories, and I didn't saw any violence or something like that. Again, because I was a tour guide, and I just ran in Tel Aviv and did some tours to soldiers about in museums and stuff like that. But in the army, you see everything, and I almost got killed in a shooting while I served in the armies, and the Intifada, the second Intifada was exactly when I was in the army. So you feel everything and you see everything, and for me it was very difficult. And I don't know, as things looks today, I'm not, although it's in many years from now, I'm not going to send my kids to the army. Not going to happen.
Thank you for sharing that. I know it's a personal question. Oh, I had a good question. Just a minute. I wonder.
Hold on a second.
Yeah, go ahead, Faisal.
Michal, I want to go back to the question of the making the film available to the retail market. How hard has your distributors tried to negotiate deals with like Prime, for instance, Amazon Prime, or there are a lot of other like Vimeo even. You could put the film on Vimeo and people can rent it individually and watch the film.
Yeah, I have to admit that I heard about this only recently.
I think we're cutting out.
Yeah.
You cut out. We didn't hear what you said. Could you just repeat it?
Yeah, I just said that I just recently heard about the option of renting the film via Vimeo, and I will check it.
Yeah.
And I don't have an answer for you about the distributor of the film because I wasn't there to see how hard they tried to sell it. So yeah. I just can only hope that they did their best.
Yeah. Okay, great. Krista, any other questions before we wrap up?
I'm just looking through.
I'll ask a question while you're thinking there.
Okay.
Have you been invited to visit the U.S. and give any talks in the U.S.?
Yeah. Well, the film released during COVID, so I had a lot of invitation and conversation via Zoom.
Mhm.
And I managed, and I was pregnant, so I managed to be only in oh my God, I forgot the name of the festival. In the festival, Other Israel.
In New York?
Other
The Other Israel Film Festival in New York.
That's in New York, yes.
Yeah. But the Scream filmed in San Francisco, Atlanta, many places, Boston. I cannot recall everything, but a lot of places.
Your film is really challenging viewers to at least open what you call the black box of Israeli history and the Nakba through the diaries of your great-grandfather. Obviously, the general education system in Israel is still refraining from addressing the Nakba. And so it's not talked about at a formal policy level in Israel. And I wondered, just given the current trends with the government, how will that ever get steered to some kind of place where the Palestinian narrative is shared, the truth of the Nakba is shared, besides these informal channels of artists and writers and activists raising that awareness?
I think it will take a little bit more of a time because it started, as I said at the beginning of the conversation, it's the new generations and the new voices are starting to be heard. And I believe that when the younger generation will be at the government, so it will be easy to talk about it in a wider aspect and wider audience, and maybe to change the way that people, that the children are learning in school about 1948. That this is not happening right now, but this will happen, I hope, in 5, 10, 15 years. I really hope so.
Well,
yeah, obviously that Jewish narrative persists. I remembered the question I wanted to ask you before when I lost my train of thought. I just wondered if you could comment on, Israeli policy is often driven officially by security measures or measures of self-defense, arguments of self-defense. Do you really think Jews in general are safer today given these kinds of policies in Israel and beyond? There's a rise in anti-Semitism around the world. How much of Israeli policy is contributing to the safety or the lack of safety for Jews, and what is the future of Israel as a Jewish nation? Did it break up?
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I heard only half of your question. I'm sorry.
No, I know it's happening to us too. I just wondered, given there's a rise in anti-Semitism, and I just wondered how if Jews, if Israelis feel safer today than they did in the past, and how efforts like yours can contribute to us getting to a place where everyone can live in safety and security.
I think that question is somewhat complex. Maybe we could turn it around and simplify it. Do you think that Israel has been good to the Jewish people around the world, or has Israel been more of a problem so far? That's the question I think Chris is trying to ask.
Yeah, but it's very complicated. What kind of Israel? Israel of 1948, Israel of 1967, or Israel of today. I think, well, what's happening right now is in Israel, I think it's going to change a lot of things for the Jewish people around the world and in Israel, and again, for the Palestinian and Arab population that lives with us here. So there is a big chance that what I'm saying now won't be relevant tomorrow. That's really, I don't have an answer for it. I'm sorry.
Well, I think we're going to wrap up. Michal, thank you so much for joining us today and for making the film and sharing it with us today with our audience. And thank you for taking the time. I apologize for some of the technical problems that we had to deal with.
Yeah, thank you for appearing on phone. That works.
Somehow we managed to make it work. I'd like to thank the audience who joined us today. We still have 90 people with us for the discussion, which is a very high percentage when we started with about 180, 190. So that's a good sign of engagement on the part of our audience.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, thanks everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for being with us. And as we say at the end, ma salama. Bye-bye.
Ma salama. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you. Ma salama.